Okay, so let's begin. Um, so, pulling up the questions now so we can discuss this. Okay, so it wants us to discuss. This is the questions it wants us to discuss. So let's start with the first one. It says, "What made Noodles and Company an attractive opportunity for Aaron Kennedy in 1995?" What do you guys think?
I think it was that whole, first of all, that whole Asian little place he ate in New York that he realized, noodles was the
Mm-hmm.
main ingredient that you could change up and make so many different ways.
Yeah,
It
he
was
was very.
easy.
What's that?
What? Go ahead.
No, I was saying I was. That's what I was gonna say. Is that one place that he went and ate changed the whole perspective of this Noodles and Company because
Mm-hmm.
he really liked the idea of noodles. He really liked that it's a different kind of cuisine than what we have here in America. Like we're not used to. We don't have just noodles. But
Mm-hmm.
but he thought he really enjoyed the food. He really enjoyed the product, and he
And
thought he thought that other
thought,
people would really
thought that
enjoy
other
it
people
too.
really enjoyed it too. Right, and that you could take noodles and make them, so many different Southeastern Asia ways and have all these different flavors in one little restaurant.
And then I think also a part to play was that those kind of businesses were doing really good. The what is it, the fast casual market. I
Mm-hmm.
think they said its projected growth was to be 15 to 20%. So it's like either ride that wave or miss it.
Right.
So realistically, I think the biggest thing that I see that attracted him for the opportunity was, like you were saying, Ellen, different types. Not only just Asian and Southern Eastern, but like there's so many different like spices and different flavors that you can make up on noodles that would just taste either amazing or might just sound really, really weird. It just kind of depends on who you are. Like you get,
Right.
there's restaurants out there that just, like have so many different types of something. And some of it sounds really good, but some of it's just like there's people out there that will eat it, but it's one of those things, noodles is just there's there's so many things you can do with it. And I think I would say that if for me, if it was me, if I was Aaron, I think it'd be an attractive opportunity as well because, it could open a door to a company or a restaurant that people are just absolutely going to love. And it's different than everything else. It's not a burger joint. It's not a chicken joint. It's not a steak
Right.
house or, you know what I mean? Like you're not going to,
Relatively healthy.
yeah, exactly. It's healthy and you're not going to have a whole lot of competition in the market. Does that make sense? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be one of the
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to have a whole lot to compete with. So I think that's why it could be a little bit more attractive too. Is it's a different type of market. So I can see where that can come from. So
I thought it was interesting too that he said after he researched a little bit, um, he found that noodles were the most universal food in the world.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that either.
yeah,
I was surprised I hadn't even ever thought about it, and then everybody eats it from emperors to peasants. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Here we thought it was pizza.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. So, what caused the company's early struggles? Why do you think so?
There was an issue at the very beginnings. I believe they had a reporting system issue. It was reporting, they were receiving reports really late. So after the problem, they were then being notified instead of like, hey, here's a problem now. Let's assess this and correct it before it becomes even deeper. And so early reporting would have been more beneficial to be able to make fast changes.
Well, it would have, except that I think if that other store in Minnesota, was it,
Yep.
had known about their financial issues before then, he may not have said, hey, I'm going to front you this money and want to open up a store here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would have seen that they were in financial trouble too. They didn't even know it, but I mean, in that situation, it probably was a good thing that nobody knew how financially in trouble they were at that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think it was more the internal reporting, kind of them seeing their own checks and balances of like when the alert would go off and basically and be like, oh crap, we're not doing so good here. Let's fix this.
Yeah. But they weren't realizing until a couple months after how financially badly they were doing as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if they could shorten that, then that would have been much better.
Mm-hmm. But it helped in that other situation of opening that other store in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what caused the early struggles was kind of mostly I think it was more like the unknown. But when you're when you're a new company, you kind of start out, you kind of have the unknown, I guess you could say.
Sure.
And I think that had to do a lot with it because let's just Noodles is you just didn't know what was going to happen. You just didn't know how attractive that was going to be. And sometimes things take off really fast, quicker than you would anticipate, and sometimes you just have to learn the hard way from that. But also comes down to personnel people as well. It could have been one of those things that they could have maybe hired people real too fast, the wrong kind of people. So it could be that maybe that store in Minnesota wasn't being run by the right people. Maybe that could be an issue too. That could be why they're having early struggles. There's a lot of things that really could have led to their early struggles, but the biggest thing that I get out of that, for their struggles was, they obviously learned quite a bit from that, and now they're, I never heard it. I really didn't know much about Noodles and Company until I read this case study, uh, either last semester or the semester before, or whatever the class was. But I've heard nothing but good things about Noodles and Company, at least from people that I know of around here that have gone to one that's
So
near.
that's what I was going to ask. Do you guys know of any in Utah?
Yeah, I think thought they're,
Because in the case study, they were talking about other states that they wanted to open up into, and one of them was Utah. And my kids have never mentioned it, but
yeah, I
or
think
my family.
there's one up in Sandy, and there's one down in Orem, and there's one in Provo.
Really?
So, yeah. There's actually one in Draper. Actually, they're all, actually, you know what? There's more than that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 in the Salt Lake Valley by itself.
Wow.
I didn't even know that. So,
Yeah, I've not even seen one.
yeah, I've never been to one, so I don't know how good it is, but I think what I was saying on I think really what caused their struggles was just the unknown for the most part, just not knowing what's going to happen, not really knowing how to really. He had a good idea how he had a good idea of his business plan, his business model, how he wanted things run. But sometimes you have these ideas of how you want to do it and how you want to start it, but sometimes they don't always go to plan. You always want to have backup plans because sometimes they just don't go the way you want them to go. They always say that it's not always going to go the way that you think it's going to be. Think it's going to go.
Right.
And I think that's where
Yeah.
the struggles came from. Is I just don't know if they adapted to those struggles right at the get-go. That's why they struggled a little bit. But once they grasped the hang of it and saw what the issues were and was able to fix them, then obviously they were able to do better and they're doing really, really well. Um, so the next topic is what role should franchising play in the company's growth?
So,
I couldn't decide which side to choose, whether they should do that or not, because there's good and bad, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought one benefit would be financially.
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah, definitely financially. I think it was their goal was to have 300 stores, which means at 58 stores they'd need another 242. That's a whole lot of
Right.
stores. And
A whole lot of stuff.
yeah, and so when they looked at that and they're looking at the capitalization that they would need to kind of get that going, if they stay the way they are, it's going to cost them 80 million. If they franchise, it's going to cost them 25 million. That's significantly less.
Right.
So you're definitely right about it. That being a benefit is kind of financially for them. I would also say maybe even it would get them in check because their distribution method, I think it was like 70% or something like that. It's just really low. Maybe they would kind of finalize that a little better if they were more franchised, if they were more accountable to other people.
Right.
Yeah, I think franchising realistically, um, I think it should. I think it should actually play a significant role in their growth because it will, and it always will. Because you can't really, you can't really grow, you can't really grow the company unless you expand it. And in any food market and any food chain, the way to expand your business is to franchise, is to get more locations up. That's the only way that you're gonna, that's why McDonald's is so good, and that's why Burger King and all those just name locations are so always growing is because they have these opportunities for franchising. And
Mm-hmm.
even though I don't know if necessarily I don't know the whole details of franchising, but I know that, like, for example, like Chick-fil-A, you can franchise a Chick-fil-A, but you can only franchise one at a time. You can't just franchise one and then go franchise another. You have to only one.
Right.
But
And then see how that goes, and then they may give you another one.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I know
I kind of like that though.
what's that?
I kind of like that they do it that way though.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do too. And I don't think realistically, I don't think you could. I don't know if you could handle the stress of franchising more than one. To be honest, I don't think I could. Anyways, I don't know if I would want to.
Well, maybe that's why they put a limit on it too.
Yeah, I think so. I
So
think that's
somebody's
why.
just not coming in and saying, "I'm going to do 5 stores,"
Right.
thinking about the end money that they could make, not the headaches and the stress and the whatever.
Yeah. I know Chick-fil-A does, I think you only do one store at a time. But like even with
Yep.
Noodles Company though, I think like even though you're franchising, even though you may not, I don't know, franchising, you do own that as a company as a whole, that's your store, regardless. But it's got a different owner, which is kind of weird. You know what I mean? You wouldn't think it's just the way the weird
Right.
that franchising is set up because like you're technically like if I went to go franchise Chick-fil-A, it's my Chick-fil-A, but Chick-fil-A is going to get their money from me anyways because it's their brand. So, but I think that's the
You
only
have to run it according to Chick-fil-A's rules and regulations and standards and whatever,
Yep.
which I also like that franchises do that because it keeps every store with a good name and a good
reputation.
reputation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's and if that's how you want your company to be run because
Right.
I wouldn't want a customer to go to one location and find something else different from the other location. Like when I go to McDonald's or when I go to a Wendy's or when I go to a Burger King, everything's the same. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I can always expect the same. Now, I don't know if the prices will be the same just because if you're in a different area, obviously prices
Right.
will be different because you have taxes and so on and so forth, or like an airport. Airports are always more expensive. But beyond that, though, the menus are usually all about the same. So you never
Right.
really, and so but I think that's the only way that realistically a food industry, restaurant industry business can grow. Realistically, is franchising. Now, obviously, there's other ways you can do it, but I think that's the more logical way. And I think that it actually plays. I think it plays more like a significant role in their growth because I don't think they would be able to grow if they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think franchising helps too because it helps everybody, all the other franchise owners, by saying everybody's the same and everybody's doing it the same way and has the same stuff, and it's people see the like Noodles and Company. Oh, I love that restaurant. Let's go there. It doesn't matter what city or state they're in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it makes it all one same fluid experience, and that actually builds up brand awareness too. You go to one
Yeah.
place, it's going to be the same anywhere else, and people really like that.
It's like our church.
Yeah, there you go. We're like a franchise.
Yeah.
That's right.
Kind of is, and the franchise owner is the bishop.
That's right.
Then you have kind of like a what do you call it? Like a regional, not a regional person, but like I guess you could call it a regional manager, and that's your stake
Yeah.
president.
Right.
And there is our analogy, our tie into the gospel.
There's our spiritual thought.
So, what are some specific advantages and disadvantages of the franchising model for Noodles, including the financial, economic, and organizational consequences?
But I think we kind of talked about that.
Yeah, we kind of did.
I would say a consequence, though,
Yeah,
of that
disadvantage.
organization is I think they mentioned that they'd have to hire some new people in just to manage the franchises, to manage
Yes, like
the
a
people
real
managing
estate
the
team.
franchises. Yeah.
Yeah, they'd have to get a real estate team. They needed a VP for something. I can't remember what now.
It's just a whole lot of change, a whole lot of new people. You don't know how they're going to do, and so that could be a risk, you could say, is just kind of like going into that unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think you obviously, the advantages of the franchising models for Noodles is obviously you're going to have a growth and a revenue advantage there. Obviously, you'll be able to grow more and you'll benefit from it. But you also, like you were saying, organizationally, um, that could be a somewhat of a disadvantage because if I remember correctly, the way that Noodles and Company hires is a little bit different than I've noticed a little bit with other companies. I guess they have a kind of a
Word of
structure.
mouth type structure, right?
Yeah, I think it's what it was, which I'm okay with that because you
Mhm.
obviously the hard thing with when you employ people is you really want someone that you know it's going to be well done. Like from coming from my job, for example, when I get people that come through and I see people's resumes and I distribute them out to the manager so he can make a hiring decision or make an idea who he wants, who he doesn't want to interview. When I see it from that perspective, it's a little bit different because when you see it that way, it can be how do I want to explain this? That when resumes come in, you don't want to ever not give the person the benefit of the doubt because sometimes these
Mhm.
resumes come in. I'm like, did you not have someone teach you how to write a resume? I'm sorry, but it's just like this is really bad. Um, but it's like, but at the same time, it's like sometimes noticed that those people that come in for the interview are totally different than what they are on paper, and I think that's the hard thing. That's something that why I kind of like the way that Noodle Company does it. It's more word of mouth. It's more just not necessarily about what's on paper because sometimes anybody could put anything on paper, like anything could, someone could write up a professional resume and just tweak it the way it needs to look for them, make it look all nice and look, and fake the interview out, like whatever you want to be. And then when they actually come in, start working, you realize you have someone else different than you thought you had. We've had a
Right.
personal example of that. We hired a gal and she came in and her resume said something. She said she had a degree. Come to find out she even didn't have a degree at
No
all.
way.
Yeah, and anyways, that's I'll have to go into more detail after the recording on that because that's quite a story. But I'm just like, for that's just an example though. Like the word of mouth, that's something that I think might be a little bit disadvantaged though because sometimes people's word of mouth, it can be the same thing as paper though. That's where I'm getting to is some, but it kind of depends. If like this person you really, really, really know have been friends for a long time and you don't have any mistrust, then I can get that word of mouth can be really a huge benefit over what's on paper. But at the same time, that word of mouth coming from someone that you may not trust as much or just have gotten to know just recently could come backfire you as well. So I think that's kind of where the disadvantage could come from as an organizational standpoint of franchising. You just want to make sure that you're putting people in your franchises that are going to be able to people to keep your standard, keep your movement of how you want the company to move and how people should know Noodles and Company versus taking a risk and not knowing what's going to come in. I would hate to have a franchise not like at least if it was my company run differently than all the rest and get a different
Right.
feedback from the customers versus like so that's where I can see a disadvantage to that point and the consequences could be substantial to the point where that store may struggle and it may struggle enough, may never get back on its feet again and may have to close it down. And then those customers start tearing out, not they just start flowing out information to family and friends about how bad of experience and that goes negatively back to Noodles and Company and can get spread out throughout the whole nation eventually, so
Yeah, they gotta have tight controls on that.
It's
And
it's crazy. Just one little thing like that, you wouldn't think it'd be a big of a deal, but it could cause a chain reaction for the whole company eventually. Hopefully not, but
Yeah.
you don't know. So,
Right.
but yeah, so I guess really in summary, I guess our final thoughts, I guess. Let's just see what this final says. To help you inform your choice, you may find it helpful to estimate how much total profit company, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, um, overall, I think Noodles and Company really has, I think, kind of to summarize our discussion here, I think, you know, they've pretty much got it set up the way they want to, and it's a good setup. They know what they're doing. Um, but I just think they just need to be kind of careful on how, just make sure all their franchises have the strict rules, like how they want to be, policies and procedures and everything, and the way they look and cleaning and employee wise, like just make sure it's all consistent over the board so they
Right.
protect themselves from any possible uh, negativity from public and from consumers and your big time money makers. Like your the way you're gonna make money is have people come in and obviously buy your products. So,
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So financially, uh, franchise is the way to go as long as they can keep that together, that portion of strict rules and making sure everyone keeps the brand strong instead of, diluting it or giving them a bad name.
yep.
So, all right.
Okay, let me